It's not just for mums. It's not just for dads. Not just for white collars, nor just for shift workers. Not just for those who are hands-on, or those behind the scenes. Not just for those with ideas, nor those who hear them. It's not just for 2020. It's for the 1,400 construction workers who took their own lives between 2011 and 2015. It's for the thousands of carers pushed out of work and all the people suffering while in it. It's for our mental health and for us to work and live, not live to work. It's for anyone who needs it. It's for you.
Hello and welcome to our session. I'm Linda Thwaite, Group Marketing and Communications Director for Sir Robert McAlpine, and I'm joined today by Lucy Proudfoot from Claremont Communications.
Hello.
Hi Lucy, hello everybody. Today we're going to be talking to you about Forever Flex, a piece of research that's been carried out during the recent pandemic to find out how to make flexible working sustainable, healthy, something that can be applied across the UK easily by all employers, and something that both Lucy and I are particularly passionate about. And the work that's been undertaken so brilliantly by Claremont and funded by Sir Robert McAlpine was on behalf of Anna Whitehouse, who you know as Mother Pucker, and we're very proud to have been working with her. So today we'll tell you a little bit about that research and what we found out, and Lucy's going to dive into that in a second. Before we do that, I just wanted to explain why Sir Robert McAlpine, who, if you didn't know, are a UK construction business, are part of this whole appeal and care about this so much. I guess it's two things. One is that I care about it personally. I think I've discovered throughout my career that the more senior I got, the more flexibility was available to me. And it struck me that that didn't feel very fair. It was great for me, but I didn't see it happening to other people. And the more that flexibility came to me, the more I was able to thrive in my role and balance my home life too, regardless of what that was. And I believe passionately that that should be available for everybody. So that's on a personal level. On a business level, Sir Robert McAlpine, we're mainly male. You know, we're a construction business. Flex, I believe, isn't a female issue. I believe it's a people issue. It's a well-being issue. And with mental health being such an issue in the UK, and then male mental health being, you know, a massive part of that, and the impact that that has on male suicide rates in the UK, increasing that even more. And then if you look at the construction sector, the fact that most of the male suicides in the UK are those that work in the construction sector, then as a business, we have a moral obligation to try and find ways to help what is an absolutely devastating thing for our country. And I believe flexibility is a massive key to improving that. And I'm sure that Lucy will go into some detail and tell us about the things that she's found out. So just a bit of information about why Sir Robert McAlpine are involved and why we feel so passionately about it. Lucy, I'm going to hand over to you, and if you could tell us a little bit about this research and what you've been doing over the past few months and what you found out.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And I think it's fair to say, Linda, we've been on quite a journey with this one, haven't we? I mean, we started planning this back in 2019 with Anna and Matt from Flex Appeal. And the long-term goal was always to focus on employers. They've done a lot of work historically that focuses on employees and individuals, but we wanted really with this to find a way of getting more employers to offer flexible working for all the reasons that you just mentioned there. And so based on our experience as behaviour change comms people, we knew that sort of just educating employers wasn't going to be enough. We felt that just hitting employers with those kind of hard facts and stats wasn't really going to work, and just telling them that flexible working was good is not enough. So we really wanted to align it with Flex Appeal's general, very sort of emotive approach, and go in with a more sort of human side of things. And our approach back in 2019 was to gather up a collection of what we were calling bright spot employers. So those the kind of employers who at the time were going against the mainstream and offering flexible working despite some of the obstacles and barriers that a lot of employers found. We were going to listen to their experiences, their successes, their failures, package them up and share them more broadly with other employers. So our aim at that point was quite simply to get more employers to try out flexible working. And then suddenly in March 2020, while we were in the middle of recruiting employers for that particular piece of research, we were struck by a global pandemic. And I think we all kind of just thought, hang on a minute, well, everybody's been sort of forced into this radical new way of working, albeit forced. They were trying out flexible working. So we got together, didn't we? And virtually, I should add, and discuss this. And it felt at that point that there was a real risk here, the real risk that people were going to conflate this forced remote working with good flexible working, and that they were actually going to miss the nuance and all the benefits that come with that sort of broader style of flexible working. So the question for us at that point shifted from how can we get employers to try flex to how can we get them to sustain flexible working in a positive, healthy way beyond COVID. So by positive, I mean not just reverting to what they did before lockdown, not just introducing working from home as a kind of blanket enforced money-saving tactic without having those sort of necessary strategies and support systems in place to make it a sort of healthy, flexible working. And not, like I just said, ignoring all the other types of flexible working, such as compressed hours, flexi time, part-time, and all the benefits that come with those. We felt that it would be really misguided for employers to think, oh, everyone's working from home, we've nailed flexible working, you know. So that's what we're really sort of trying to fight against with this piece of research. So our approach is actually pretty similar. We've been out and we've spoken to a range of employers from up and down the country, different sizes, different sectors. And critically, ones who've been doing flex for some time, ones who've been around the block, with their journey pre-COVID. And it was this long-term experience that we wanted to really draw down from. What were their success stories, but also what were the headaches? What were the challenges in getting flexible working off the ground? And what are their tried and tested tactics that other employers who find themselves in this sort of current state of accidental flex can learn from and use to help them on their flexible working journey?
I think that's really key, isn't it, Lucy? That kind of really usable information for employers. And I think that's certainly what I know we've spoken about a few times over recent months is missing from the workplace. There's a will and a determination and there's benefits of, but the how to really doesn't seem to exist. So
definitely, there's no shortage of good reasons why the business case has kind of been made time and time again. But yeah, absolutely wanted to drill down into the how do you make it work. So there were two parts to our research. First of all, we wanted to kind of stop and do a bit of a temperature check, no pun intended. So we commissioned a short survey amongst 1,400 employers. And we asked questions like, what types of flexible working are you using now? How does that differ? How is that affecting productivity, staff happiness? How is that going to stick in your company in 2 years' time? But that provides a nice snapshot, but as with all surveys, you're only really getting the what, you're not really getting the why. So the bulk of our time for this research was actually spent doing qualitative research. We did 32 interviews with 32 different employers, and asking them, what was flexible working like for you pre-COVID? How have you coped during lockdown? And what are your kind of hopes and fears for the future? A really fascinating and really enjoyable process. I mean, speaking to this huge range of organisations who are making it work in a way that works for them. And, you know, the people we spoke to are the leaders, the decision makers, the same people that this report is now aimed at. We've nicknamed them flex makers, haven't we, Linda? Because kind of, you know, the real sort of doers in their organisation who are really trying to make that change, but might be coming up against constant battles, and that's kind of exhausting for them.
And it's a breadth of sectors and kind of markets that you had conversations with. Am I right, Lucy?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, so we had kind of dog food makers and designers and cabinet makers, and you know, we've tried to sort of, it's not perfect. We could definitely speak to more, but it's the start. It's a really good start. And we've created a report called Forever Flex, Flexible Working Beyond a Crisis. And I really look forward to, you know, having a good read of it. But there are three main sections. The first one is focusing on the data from the survey. So it's a kind of snapshot of where we are. And that's kind of the sort of summary of that really is that people have flex-experimented, they have tried it, and they want more. So that's a really good sign. That's the sort of stats that we're getting there. The middle section is called What Can We Do? And this is really where we get to the kind of the how section. So within that, you've got three key themes that come out of our 32 interviews. It's a kind of distillation of the collective wisdom and experience from those employers who are doing flexible working well. The first theme within which is called Crisis Tunity, which is a way of sort of setting the scene and recognizing that with crisis comes a great opportunity for change. And we are in a global pandemic. This is a huge crisis, which on one hand is awful, but let's use it as an opportunity to make change. But let's do it right. Let's do it with caution, and let's listen to what other employers have done so that we can make sure we're doing that.
And Lord, we need something good. Sorry, Lucy. Lord, we need something good to come from this, don't we? And I think that if this is one of the things that can come from such a challenging and testing and tumultuous time for everybody, then that would be wonderful, wouldn't it? You know, certainly for everyone who's watching today, it's obviously something that they're passionate about anyway, but perhaps just can't quite grasp or can't quite get to. So, you know, so it is the crisis tunity word, I think is brilliant as well.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, timing matters as well. When business as usual has been disrupted, then change can occur. And in this section, we outline some perhaps more mundane examples like change in leadership or office closures. So if your company isn't necessarily able to change completely off the back of this, don't despair. There are other moments when you can make that change happen. The second chapter we've called Keeping Control. And this focuses on how to understand the power dynamics between colleagues and what might be getting in the way of good flexible working. So our employers told us time and time again that trust is like the #1 ingredient for making flexible working work. But we felt it was potentially a bit nebulous just to say, oh, trust your colleagues, because actually it's quite hard for some people to do. I'm sure you've had experiences of that. And so we dug a bit deeper. You know, what's helping to build that trust? What might destroy that trust? And we found various examples in our interviews of how someone's ability to trust was heavily linked to how in control of a situation they felt. How when they feel like they're losing that control, that trust is just completely threatened. So we've outlined some scenarios where colleagues might feel out of control and therefore not able to dish out that trust. And you know, the reason for that is, you know, if you want to change behaviour, you've got to understand it better. You've got to understand what people's motivations are, so that when Johnny from management denies someone's request, he's perhaps not just being an idiot or being annoying or difficult. He might be experiencing a really overwhelming sense of loss of control, and that's really uncomfortable for him. So we're hoping with this section that it will build empathy and get people to understand their colleagues' motivations a bit better. And what we're seeing here with chapters 1 and 2 is, you know, these employers have taken the time to build the layers and get the conditions right before they then go on to deploy further tactics that will make flexible working work, which I think is a critical point. You know, if people have been thrown into the state of flex as they have now, it doesn't necessarily mean it will last, you know, until you sort out those trust issues, until you sort out those control issues and get the conditions right, you're not going to be able to get that good, healthy, sustainable flex that we think is critical. Then the final section is called Forget Education, which is really the kind of nuts and bolts of how employers we spoke to got flexible working off the ground in their respective workplaces. It demonstrates that this rational approach of just educating through facts and stats and PowerPoint after PowerPoint very rarely works. And we had some sort of people who told us that in their own words. So what we've provided here is a collection of the 8 most common themes that kept coming up from the interviews, of the alternative approaches that did work, the tried and tested methods, if you like. So to give you an example, one would be the importance of setting really clear boundaries on expectations. So if you've got people working in kind of lots of different locations, which invariably you will have at the moment, it's going to be much harder to manage. And the need for those clearly defined boundaries and expectations is critical. You know, do you want people to work core hours? Do you need people to tell you and communicate what they're doing throughout the day? Is the work that people are doing directly contributing to your specific quarterly goals? Then, tell them, make it really clear to them. And we heard that, that setting of boundaries was a really useful way of making people feel more in control of their situation. And another one was around, which I thought was really interesting, was around reframing flex so that it suits your business. One thing that came up quite a lot, particularly from sort of more established, more old-fashioned organisations, was that the very notion or term flexible working felt a bit sort of, for millennials, not for us, almost a bit kind of incongruous with their vision of what the organisation stood for. And again, it is threatening that sense of control. And that simple act of reframing it, rename it, make it relevant to your business and your brand, call it something else like dynamic working. It doesn't really matter. What matters is it's just a way of working better. And this guy used this really lovely quote. He was like, you can still be a demanding, exacting company with traditional values and yet still work flexibly. It's just a better way of getting better talent, really.
Yeah, I think that's one that we found ourselves, isn't it, when I was trying to explain my experience within Sir Robert McAlpine, in that we're 151 years old. We've got obviously some quite traditional ways of working. We're builders and engineers, and even in my experience, coming in all pro flex, and seeming like it was some alien talking about something that would never fit in our business. I recognize that disconnect between the terminology and the actual benefits and how it could impact on the business. I think I've told you in the past, Lucy, that even within my team, we had a tiny team of 8 that directly report to me. And I was talking here about how let's be flexible, get the job done, whatever suits you, let's focus on the deliverables. And below me, there was a conversation with the same people. Oh no, you need to be in the office 9 to 5. I need to see what you're doing. I need to be able to call you if you don't, so that even in tiny teams, there can be microcosms of acceptance and just a disconnect, which I think is really fascinating. And terminology, I think you're right, is key to that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And one way of dealing with that came up was getting that conversation, escalating it more broadly and making sure that everyone's involved. So it's not just someone is creating a flexible working policy that no one knows about or no one understands. Getting every team member involved is really, really important. So, and then the final section of the report pivots slightly, and it's called Employers Like You. And really this was a sort of opportunity to bring some of the employer voices to the forefront. So we've got a selection of lovely quotes that demonstrate those recurring hopes and fears that people have got about what the future holds in a post-COVID world. Not that any of us really know what that looks like, but
it's coming. Surely it's on its way soon. We need post-COVID world.
Yeah. So a big hope amongst our employers was that this was just the start for flexible working. Let's push the boundaries. Let's see how far we can take this. But equally, a big fear was around that lack of social cohesion and culture. that so many organisations have fought for and strive for over the years. So some very interesting bits there. And then we've got 4 long form first person employer stories, which just outline some people's journeys along that flexible working pathway, the ups and the downs, the highs, the lows, the human angle really. And so in there we hear about how one employer decided that before progressing, she wanted to run workshops and interviews and surveys with her entire workforce before even starting to get flexible working off the ground. And another one who had this series of workshops specifically for middle managers, all planned out, and someone was going to come in and run them. And actually there was this 2 very distinctive cohorts between the middle managers, some who loved flex, some who hated it. And between them, they ended up kind of battling it out and really deepening their understanding of what flexible working meant. So that was quite nice to hear. But those are just a taster really, Linda. There'll be more stories on the FlexAppeal website. So if you're kind of looking for one that you can relate to you as an employer, I urge you to check out that website. It'll be sat alongside the report. But as with all of this is just about inspiring, encouraging employers like you and others to keep persevering, because one thing that came up time and time again was flexible working was not always the easy option at all, but it was 100% worth it in their experience.
100%, Lucy, thank you. And I think that's what the Forever Flex report can be to people. It can be an absolute how-to and help guide, whether it's something that they share with their organisation or that they use personally to help them progress on that journey. And it is, not to sound a bit too X Factor about it, it is a journey. It's not going to happen overnight, and it is going to be different for everybody, and helping understand what flex means appropriately for your personal situation and then that of your business. I think that the fact that there's such a big spectrum of that is what potentially makes it a complex issue. I think one of the really interesting things you speak about in the report is that control issue. And I think that really struck me, that I had always come to flex from a position of this is what I need, and why can't they see that this is what will make me better for the business? And I'd never really thought of where the motivations for rejection come from on the opposing side. And I think that it's really interesting to open that up and unpack it and think, why is this person fearful? Why are there potential trust issues, and coming around it? Yeah, sure, it feels slightly long-winded in some ways. Maybe you don't get exactly what you want when you want it, but it is a longer term sustainable option, which I think is a really healthy way to approach it, which I think is great the way you've pulled that out.
Yeah.
So when you were doing all these interviews, because I know that you spoke to so many of these people, if not all, is that right, when you did these 32 interviews?
Yeah, 28 of the 32 I did. So
nice,
it was
busy pandemic for Lucy. I just wondered, what would you say that you've noted are the key differences for those that have made it work and they've implemented it and it's up, it's running, it's healthy and working all round? What differentiate those businesses, or what have they done that's made it work, Lucy?
Well, lots of things, I guess. But the thing that really stands out, I think, Linda, would be the communication piece. So not only sort of communicating well around what flexible working means, so that everyone in the organisation understands it, but that dialogue between departments, where flexible working hasn't just been regarded as an HR issue and just operates in silo, and escalated and explained so that people really understand it, and potentially workshopped as well, so people have had training on it. I heard frequent stories from HR people who found out that their lots of people's requests were being denied, particularly by that sort of middle management level, and that was deeply frustrating for them, because they'd spent months planning these policies. So, but really the kind of message there is that just having policy is not enough. If that's stagnating, then that's not okay. It needs to be communicated more broadly. But also part of that communication piece is where businesses were brave and bold enough to have those kind of difficult conversations and ask the awkward questions. Why are we still doing it like this? Or what difference would it make if so-and-so left early on a Thursday or opened those floodgates. You know, that willingness to kind of bring those questions to the table, I think, was what stood out for me with these organisations.
To see it through. I think one of the things for us, you know, we've got a mixed workforce in that we have people based in offices like me. So, you know, it's pretty easy for me to become flexible as long as I'm at the right meetings when we could go to meetings at the right time. But the majority of our people are on site. You know, they're in hard hats and big boots and they're on site, and there is no formal blueprint for flex on site. And that's certainly something that I know we want to approach and pilot and test, but it is a very bold and a very brave move to say, okay, this massive construction project. I mean, if you think the construction projects we work on, like, you know, Elizabeth Tower, Big Ben, or building the Olympic Stadium, you can't really mess around with those. You know, they have to be delivered well and they have to be on time. So to approach a project like that and say, how do we have those difficult conversations and how do we test things? It is a complex issue and it takes time, but it does, above all, it's the will that gets you to that point, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah. And how it's communicated as well. I think you touched upon something very real. We spoke to people with the same issue, and they're constantly managing that battle of the haves and the have not. Those people who might see certain people doing things and think, well, we can't have that. You've got to get in there quickly and communicate to that team that you can't have that, no, because you can't physically work from home and get your job done, but you can have this instead. So a kitchen manufacturer that we spoke to had a whole sort of cohort of factory workers. So she couldn't let them work from home because the work wouldn't get done, but she could give them different hours and sort of a bit of flexibility there, to the point where she had members of her team who were able to pick up their kids from school for the first time ever.
Amazing. And do you think that our response to that as a country now will have changed because of the impact of COVID, whether it be positive or negative?
I really do. Yeah, I really hope so anyway. I mean, I think that people have seen that, I think a lot of those kind of barriers have been broken down and we're all operating on a far more sort of human level. We're all in this together. I think I have real hopes that would be the case. Yeah,
me too. Fingers crossed for us all, I think, and for those that need it, who are out there watching. Honestly, I think the report's fascinating. Claremont have done an amazing piece of work, and it really has the spirit of Mother Pucker and Anna's will to achieve something for the country running right through it. So I commend you and the team at Claremont for what you've done. And I hope that everybody takes the time to go and access it and take a look and use it as they will. I think I'd love to finish on a bit of a positive, if that's okay, Lucy. It's a really inspiring report, but it's a very difficult time, and I'd love to find out what you think was the most positive or hopeful part of the research that you undertook, and maybe share that with us.
Yeah, gosh, again, like a tricky one, just sort of pin down one. But I think first of all, the sort of snapshot from the stats, you know, the fact that people have had to change things and they have been doing more flexibility, and the stats are showing that people want to keep that going. So that's a real, that's a real positive that I think we should all take away from this. But I think for me, the thing that really stood out was this, the deepening of relationships, and particularly between with clients, so people where there have been previous fears that, okay, we might want to offer flexibility, but well, how will that look to our clients? Will it make us look unprofessional? Will we be worrying that we won't get the work done on time? And then suddenly what I was hearing was that people were having these Zoom calls with their clients where there were children jumping around in the background or dogs jumping over their laptop. And suddenly you see each other as humans. We're all struggling. We're all trying to get work done and homeschool, and we're all just doing our best. And so I think the real positive from this is that we've broken down some of those formalities, and those relationships have deepened and strengthened, and that honesty and openness is kind of prevailing and really improving relationships, which, let's be honest, in the long term is going to improve your metrics and your business KPIs. So that's a very good positive.
Lucy, I think that's lovely, because having that veil lifted in some way, I think really has changed things for the way we work as businesses, and maybe see each other more as people, which has got to support our move towards flexible working for for everyone, which is what we want in the long run, isn't it? So thank you so much for taking time to share the findings. I think we'll call it to a close there. I think we'll be around for questions. And Lucy, thanks very much, and everybody who's taken time to listen today. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be available for questions afterwards. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much. Thank you for supporting it, Linda. It's been great.
No worries.